The tower groaned like a ship's mast in a storm. Wind clawed at the steel braces of Tower 19, a 140-foot skeleton standing alone on Devil's Crown Ridge. Rain hit sideways, atomized by gusts that howled through the lattice. Alex Harper watched the needle on the anemometer jerk past 80 miles an hour and kept one hand on the center beam to steady himself. The whole cab trembled, bolts squealing against old welds. He had ridden worse on rescue helicopters, but back then there were rotors overhead and a crew on the intercom. Here there was only wind, and Luna, pressed under the bunk, her black-masked muzzle buried between her paws. Lightning cracked over the ridge, throwing white veins across the windows. For a second the forest below flared silver and vanished again into black. Alex checked the radio, static. He thumbed the transmit key anyway. Tower 19 to District Base. Whitaker, you copy? Nothing. Only the hiss of blown-out frequencies. He exhaled through clenched teeth. Fine. We'll ride it out. Outside, the sky flexed like a living thing, low, purple, boiling. A bomb cyclone had roared off the Pacific overnight and slammed the Cascades head-on. The timberline swayed in waves, treetops whipping like grass. Somewhere down in the darkness a pine gave up and snapped, a gunshot crack swallowed by wind. Alex marked the time in his logbook, 23:47. Pressure dropping fast. He flipped his hood up and stepped onto the catwalk. Rain stung like needles. The catwalk vibrated under his boots as the tower bowed a few inches, then rebounded. He traced the beam of his headlamp over the guy cables, taut, singing. Far below, the ridge road was gone under fog and debris. No way down tonight. He thought of the coast again, the rotor wash, the taste of salt, the radio chutter that had ended with 2 teenagers and an impossible cliff. Every storm since had felt like penance. When the Forest Service offered the lookout post, he told himself it was temporary, just a season to get his head straight. Now the storm outside felt like the world's reminder that isolation was never the same thing as peace. Thunder rolled. Luna whimpered. Alex crouched beside her, scratching behind her ears until her trembling slowed. Hey, easy girl. It's just noise. But he could feel her heartbeat hammering through his hand. At 0:30 the power flickered. The generator downstairs coughed once, twice, then died. Emergency lights glowed weak red. He grabbed the hand-crank lantern, winding until his wrist ached, then hung it over the logbook. Outside the windows, rain streaks glowed faintly crimson, as if the whole storm burned from within. The radio spat a burst of sound, half a word, maybe 2 syllables, then silence. He leaned in. Say again. Only static. Then a low tone, not feedback but something deeper, rolling through the speaker like a foghorn heard underwater. It rose, flattened, and dissolved into white noise. Alex turned the knob down. Bad connection. But he kept staring at the receiver, jaw tight. No repeater in the district made that kind of note. At 1:10 the wind hit its peak. The tower swayed enough to send the coffee mug skidding across the desk. Alex braced against the frame, feeling every movement through his spine. Luna barked once, sharp and frightened. He almost answered her, some instinctive, useless reassurance, but the next flash of lightning cut him off. For that instant the ridge wasn't empty. Something vast and black stood among the trees to the north, an outline, maybe smoke, maybe shadow, but it moved against the wind, slow and deliberate. When darkness returned, the space where it had been was only rain. He rubbed the window with his sleeve and saw nothing but glare. Eyes playing tricks, he muttered, though his pulse said otherwise. By 2 o'clock the storm began to shift. The roar dimmed to a steady moan. He noted pressure rising, temperature dropping. When he looked again at Luna, she had inched from beneath the bunk, staring at the door. Her ears tracked something outside, some rhythm Alex couldn't hear yet. A minute later he caught it too, a faint, off-beat pulse, like a heart through walls. Maybe thunder rebounding down the valley. Maybe not. He told himself fatigue was twisting perception. 36 hours awake since the pre-storm patrol, 1 meal skipped, too much caffeine. He rubbed his eyes until color bloomed behind the lids. When he opened them, the lantern light had dimmed to a dull ember. He wound it again, the crank rasping in the silence that followed the storm's retreat. At dawn, the rain stopped. The quiet was worse than the wind. He stepped outside into air sharp with ozone and pine. Fog poured through the trees, low and slow, calling around the tower's base. The forest looked scarred, branches torn, bark stripped. Somewhere water dripped in the rhythm of a clock. His boots squelched in puddles as he circled the catwalk. Far to the west, beyond the broken ridgeline, sunlight broke through shredded clouds. Columns of gold light touched the valley, leaving the peaks in bruised shadow. He breathed once, long, until the metallic taste in his mouth faded. Storm over. Alive. That was something. He climbed back inside and tried the radio again. Tower 19 to District Base. Whitaker, you there? No response. He switched channels, repeated the call, waited through a minute of static. Still nothing. He glanced at Luna. She sat alert, staring east, ears forward, body rigid. The fur along her spine lifted one slow inch at a time. Alex followed her gaze through the window. Downslope, a single tree had fallen across the service trail. Beyond it, the mist moved in layers, as though something inside were breathing. He couldn't shake the thought that it wasn't just weather shifting down there but intent, a motion that noticed him back. He packed his gear mechanically, chainsaw, radio battery, first aid roll. Standard blowdown patrol, he told himself. Check the trail, clear debris, be back by noon. Simple. But his hands wouldn't stop trembling when he tightened the straps. The fatigue should have settled by now, instead, unease sharpened every sense. Come on, girl. He clipped the leash. Luna resisted for a heartbeat, then fell in beside him, tail low. They started down the metal staircase spiraling toward the ground. The forest smelled different, wet stone, crushed cedar, something faintly metallic under it all. He paused at the last landing, scanning the tree line. Every sound seemed distant, flattened. Even the crows were silent. By the time they reached the trailhead, the fog had thinned into tatters. Sunlight spilled across slick leaves, bright enough to sting his eyes. Luna padded ahead, nose to the ground, tracing invisible currents of scent. Alex noted the fallen fir blocking the bend, bark shredded where lightning had graced it. He fired up the saw, cut through the trunk, and dragged pieces aside until the path was clear. When the motor stopped, silence rushed back in, thicker than before. That was when the radio on his belt crackled to life, a single click, then 3 tones descending in sequence. Not Whitaker. Not any Forest Service code he knew. He lifted it to his ear. Base, say again. Nothing. He waited another few seconds, then sighed and shut it off. Maybe residual charge, maybe cross-signal from a ham operator. The ridge was a magnet for weird frequencies when the ionosphere was jumpy. Still, the pattern bothered him. It had cadence, almost language. Luna whined softly and looked uphill toward the tower, ears twitching. Alex followed her gaze. Through the mist he could just make out the steel silhouette swaying faintly in the windless air, as if breathing. He rubbed a hand over his face. Sleep, that's what we need. They started back toward the stairs. Halfway up, a fresh gust rolled through the trees, colder than it should have been. It carried with it the distant echo of that same low tone he'd heard through the radio, drawn out, metallic, mournful. By the time he reached the cab again, some light had faded behind new clouds. He logged the patrol in shaky handwriting, sealed the notebook, and leaned on the railing. Below, the forest waited, unnaturally still, every leaf poised. Somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder muttered once, then quit. He told himself the storm was over. He was wrong. By noon the clouds had thinned to pale shreds, but the forest still felt bruised. Branches dripped, the soil sucked at boots, and sunlight pooled in cold patches that never reached full warmth. Alex Harper ran a cloth over the fogged radio and listened to static hissing like a live wire. Nothing from base. No chatter, no weather update. Just that endless hush, the kind that pressed against the eardrums until even breath sounded like intrusion. He stuffed the handset into his vest and shouldered his pack. "Come on, Luna," he said, his voice barely carrying. "We'll sweep the north trail, mark any downed lines, then call it." Luna trotted forward, tail level, nostrils quivering in the damp air. Her coat still smelled faintly of ozone from last night's storm. They followed the switchbacks down from Tower 19, steel stairs slick with moss and rain. The forest swallowed the tower's outline within minutes, until only the faint hum of wind through the girders lingered. Alex tightened the strap on his pack and tested his boots in the muck. Each step drew a wet sigh from the earth. At the ridge's base, the Goat Rocks trail split east and west. He chose east, closer to the blowdown reports from last week. The storm had erased most of the flagging tape, leaving only torn ends fluttering from roots. He replaced them as he walked, a breadcrumb trail in orange and white. Birdsong began timidly, one note, then another. Normalcy returning, he thought. Nature rebooting its soundboard. Still, the quiet between calls felt too clean, like static removed in post-production. Half an hour in, they reached a slope where the wind had ripped open the canopy. Sunlight poured through a 100-foot gash, spotlighting splintered trunks. Alex knelt beside one and ran a finger along the exposed rings, fresh, raw, smelling of sap. 6 years, he muttered. You didn't even get a chance. Luna's bark cut him short. She stood rigid a few yards ahead, tail frozen, ears pitched forward. The hackles along her back rose in a slow ripple. "What is it?" he called, stepping toward her. She didn't move. Only her head turned slightly, tracking something to the right, downhill, where the slope vanished into mist. Alex followed her line of sight. There, half buried in debris from the storm, ran a game trail he'd never noticed before. It tunneled between ferns and basalt boulders, narrow and deliberate. No signage. No GPS pin. Yet the soil showed fresh scuff marks, as if something heavy had passed since the rain stopped. Alex frowned. The Forest Service maps for this sector were burned into his memory. He'd surveyed them last week during fireline prep. No side path existed here. He unslung his GPS receiver, waited for signal, and watched the screen blink searching, then fail. Great. Dead zone. Luna tugged her leash once, soft but insistent. He followed a few steps, brushing aside wet ferns, until the trail widened enough to reveal a mound of volcanic basalt stones, stacked chest-high in perfect symmetry. A cairn, but not random. Each rock was flat-faced, fitted like teeth. Moss still clung to the lower layers, but the upper stones were clean, washed by last night's rain. Someone had built it recently. Alex felt the hair on his arms rise. There were cairns along old ranger routes, sure, but none this far inside restricted land. And never like this, so precise, so deliberate. He crouched, running a hand across the top stone. Smooth edges, faint warmth, as if it had held sunlight longer than it should. Who the hell's been out here? Luna whined, circling the mound, nose low. Then, before he could stop her, she vaulted the cairn and disappeared into the fog. Luna! His shout hit the mist and died. No echo. No bark in reply. He climbed the stones, boots slipping on wet basalt. Luna, heel. Now. Nothing. When he cleared the top, the world shifted. The trail on the far side dipped into a basin of grey rock and skeletal trees. Obsidian Basin, his mind supplied, though he hadn't heard that name in years. The Forest Service had erased it from maps in 2003 after a landslide, or so the official report claimed. The air on the other side felt heavier, 20 degrees colder. Breath clouded instantly. Fog hugged the ground in thin sheets, moving not with the wind but against it. He dropped down, boots landing in soft ash rather than soil. The silence was total. Even the hum of insects was gone. His own heartbeat sounded intrusive. Luna. His voice came back flat, as if recorded and played through a broken speaker. Footprints dotted the damp ground ahead, Luna's paw prints, perfectly spaced, leading deeper into the grey. He followed them, scanning between the columns of mist. Each step dulled color further, until green became slate and shadow became weight. At 20 yards the trail twisted. Something glinted in the brush. Alex crouched and brushed away needles. A scrap of yellow fabric caught under a root, synthetic, torn, edges frayed. He tugged gently until the rest slid free, a child's rain jacket, Ray logo faded, tag reading size 6X 2001 season. He froze. The material was still damp. Warm, even. Impossible. The name field on the tag was smeared, but he could make out a few letters, EVE. He stared at it for a long moment, his breath fogging the air above it. Then a deep vibration rolled through the ground, subtle but steady. Thump, 4 seconds, thump. He rose slowly, scanning the basin. The rhythm wasn't thunder. It was slower, heavier, like machinery buried deep beneath the rock. Luna's tracks continued toward the sound. Another pulse. Thump. A flock of crows burst from the treetops far away, silent silhouettes swallowed instantly by mist. The ground trembled again, faint dust rising around his boots. Luna, return, he barked, voice cracking. No answer. Only the next beat, closer now. Thump, thump. He switched off his headlamp, the air itself seemed to glow faint blue, enough to see by. Ahead, the trail split around a jagged spire of basalt. He chose left, following the paw prints that deepened with each step as if Luna were running. The sound grew louder. Not an explosion, not whined through a canyon, something alive producing that resonance, every thump followed by a faint metallic rattle, like chains underwater. He felt the weight of the cairn behind him even without turning. The idea of crossing back through it gnawed at him. What if it was one way? What if it had closed? His watch vibrated, a habit from years of rescue work, set to beep hourly. He glanced down. 10:14 a.m. He blinked, looked again, 3:27 p.m. The second hand didn't move. A cold line traced his spine. The next pulse hit, and this time the fog rippled with it. Curtains of grey lifting, folding, reshaping. Between them something vast shifted, too tall, too fluid to be animal, too organic to be machine. The air carried a new note above the rhythm, a rising veil of metal through water, a siren that wasn't built by humans. Alex stumbled backward, one hand over his ear. The sound clawed at bone rather than air, vibrating inside his teeth. His flashlight flickered, then died. In the dim glow that remained, Luna's tracks curved left, straight into the densest part of the fog. He ran after her. The ground tilted downward, slippery with wet ash. The thumping quickened, the siren's pitch climbed. Shapes moved on the periphery, trees bending, shadows elongating and contracting. For one instant, through the hedge, he saw a silhouette dart across the path. Luna's form, tail low, sprinting toward the sound. Luna. His voice came out thin, devoured instantly. He ran harder. Each breath stabbed his ribs. Every few steps the ground seemed to shift grain, like walking across a drumskin. The fog brightened until shadows vanished altogether, leaving only a field of pale blue light. Then, without warning, silence. The pulse stopped. The siren cut mid-note. Even the tremor in the ground vanished. Alex staggered to a halt, gasping. The basin stretched before him, colorless, featureless. No trees, no trail, only shifting hedge. His heart hammered, desperate to fill the new emptiness. Luna, he whispered. Something moved ahead, a flutter of yellow, small and human-shaped. He lifted the jacket in his hand and realized it was identical. The same tear at the sleeve. The same tag. He hadn't found it again, he'd never stopped holding it. His stomach turned cold. He looked around for any reference point, any ridge, any shadow of Tower 19. Nothing. The fog thickened, closing like water. Somewhere inside it, far away, a low rumble began again. Thump, thump. He turned toward it because there was nowhere else to go. Behind him, unseen, the cairn stood silent at the basin's mouth, its stones faintly humming, as if remembering the sound that had passed through. Mist closed around Alex Harper like gauze. Every direction looked the same, soft blue hedge, wet stone, the hush of pressure before thunder. He tried the radio again. Static, then a hollow click. Even feedback refused to live here. He marked his path the way he always had in collapse zones, carving a small notch into a nearby trunk with his knife. The bark split clean, but no sap bled out, as if the tree itself was stone beneath a film of color. When he touched it again, the cut had already begun to fade. Luna. His voice felt small, stolen. Come on, girl, come back. No echo. The sound was swallowed whole. He pulled his compass, thumbed the bezel, waited for the needle to settle. It spun twice and pointed straight down. The basin seemed to breathe. He checked his footing, ash, slick with moisture but strangely elastic, like wet paper stretched over hollow ground. Every step returned a faint tremor, a vibration that didn't match his pace. Something's under there, he thought. Something big. The smell changed first, iron, ozone, the sterile bite of hospital corridors. Then came the vibration again, longer now, rising through the soles of his boots and into his bones. The pulse had rhythm. Intent. Thump, pause, thump. He switched off the headlamp. It was brighter without it. The air glowed of its own accord, silver grey and depthless. Shadows shifted beneath the fog, not cast by light but by thought. When he looked directly at them, they smoothed out. When he looked away, they moved. He forced himself forward, following the paw prints. They laid down a shallow incline toward what looked like water, a flat plane reflecting nothing. When he knelt beside it, the surface quivered but didn't mirror him. Beneath the film, shapes drifted, pale outlines of branches, bones, maybe roots. They shifted as if caught in current, though the surface never rippled. A faint growl came from his left. Luna. He turned, scanning the fog. A silhouette materialized, a dog's frame, ears erect, tail low. Relief punched through his chest. "Good girl," he whispered, stepping closer. "You scared the..." The shape froze. Not breathing. Not moving. The outline was perfect, but wrong in its stillness. Then it folded, collapsing inward like smoke drawn through a vent. The fog absorbed it whole. He stumbled backward, breath sharp. Jesus. The pulse came again, closer. He could feel it in his teeth. Thump, thump. Somewhere behind the veil of mist, metal scraped stone. The sound echoed once, twice, then split into harmonics, a layered drone that vibrated his sternum. His chest ached with each note. He'd felt things like this underwater, the pressure wave of turbines through hull plating, but this carried meaning. He could swear the intervals repeated in threes, like sonar calls. A pattern. A language. He crouched, pressing his palm to the ground. It trembled faintly, like a vast lung drawing breath. "Alex to base," he whispered, thumbing the radio even though he knew. "If anyone copies." A reply cut through, a whisper buried in static. 19, hold position. Then silence. He froze. The voice was warped but human. Male. He replayed it in his head, could have been Cole Whitaker, or something imitating cadence more than tone. Cole, confirm transmission. Nothing. He checked the battery, half charge. Antenna extended. The line crackled again, but this time only the low mechanical hum remained. And under it, faintly, another sound, wet clicking, like a throat learning speech. He snapped the radio off. The quiet afterward felt like decompression. Wind picked up. No, not wind, air displacement. The fog ahead bowed outward, then rolled back in concentric rings. Out of the folds rose shapes, pillars of basalt, each as tall as a man, forming an uneven circle. Between them, the fog thickened into vertical sheets, rising and falling in rhythm with the ground pulse. Alex approached the nearest pillar. Its surface shimmered with thin veins of dull red light, pulsing like capillaries. When he reached out, the glow dimmed beneath his fingertips. The stone was warm. He drew his hand away and the pulse resumed, faster now, as if it had felt him and quickened. He stepped inside the ring. The air changed temperature instantly, colder, drier, metallic. Sound dampened further until his own breath rasped like sandpaper. In the center of the circle lay something half-buried, a helmet, caked in ash, the faded stencil of a U.S. Army unit number barely visible beneath grime. He knelt, brushing it clean. Calder, the nameplate read. The serial was recent, 20 teens, maybe newer. The inside smelled of rust and something sore, like old blood. When he lifted it, a crack echoed through the basin. The pillars shuddered, their internal light flaring white. The pulse beneath his feet doubled tempo, thump-thump, thump-thump, and the air filled with that brass-in-the-throat moan he'd heard from the radio. The siren. It rose from below, not above, an organic billow forced through impossible lungs. The ground flexed. Dust lifted in spirals. The sound deepened until his vision shook. Alex clamped his hands over his ears, teeth grinding. The siren peaked, held, then broke into fragments of higher tone, like metal dragged across an amphitheater of bone. The vibration crawled along his spine, lit nerves like wires. When it stopped, the silence left pressure behind, a vacuum of sound. His knees trembled. He didn't realize he was crying until he tasted salt. The fog thinned. The pillars dimmed to dull ember. In their fading light he saw footprints appear in the ash, not Luna's, not his. Bare human feet, small, child-sized, leading away from the helmet toward the northern slope. He forced air into his lungs. Everly Quinn, he whispered before his mind could stop him. The name from the tag. He followed, slow, scanning for movement. Every few yards the footprints grew fresher, darker, until he could see the glisten of moisture where toes had pressed. The tracks curved around a jagged ridge and vanished into thicker fog. He rounded the bend, and froze. Ahead, maybe 30 yards away, a figure stood knee-deep in mist. Small frame, shoulder-length hair plastered to a neon-yellow jacket far too clean for its age. The child turned, face half-lit by the pale glow of the basin. Eyes unfocused, skin pale as quartz. Alex's throat closed. Everly? She didn't answer. Her lips moved once, no sound. Then she lifted a hand and pointed past him. He turned. One of the basalt pillars had split open like a wound. Inside it pulsed something not stone, a membrane of black glass, flexing slowly. Behind that translucent wall, massive shapes shifted, distorted by depth, coils, ribs, movement on a scale that mocked proportion. A single circular glow flared within, as though an eye the size of a vehicle tire had opened. The siren began again, but softer now, almost intimate. The tone rolled through the basin like breath drawn over brass reeds. Each pulse matched his heartbeat until they fused. Alex stumbled backward. The child's shape blurred in the peripheral light, swallowed by fog. The footprints ended abruptly at the edge of a shallow pit where the ash had caved inward. From its center rose Luna's bark, sharp, panicked, echoing as if from miles away. He dropped to his knees, digging with bare hands. The ash gave way too easily, collapsing in sheets. Beneath it lay a narrow fissure, glowing faintly blue from within, exhaling cold air that smelled of brine. Luna barked again, closer, then yelped. Hold on. He clipped a carabiner to his belt, anchored rope to the nearest pillar, and lowered himself into the crevice. The walls shimmered with moisture, and beneath it, smooth metal, ribbed like the interior of a massive pipe. The light deepened as he descended, oscillating with the siren's rhythm. 10 feet down, the ground leveled into a tunnel carved through basalt. Ash drifted like snow. Luna's prints reappeared, pacing circles near the far wall before vanishing into darkness. He knelt, running a trembling hand across the surface. Faint etchings covered it, letters, numbers, old serial codes. He could just make out a phrase stenciled near the edge. U.S. Forest Service Site 19 Protocol Red Siren. He looked up into the fog swirling above the fissure, the torn sky beyond, and knew he wasn't supposed to be here. Then the ground trembled again, thump, thump, and the siren's voice rolled down the tunnel like thunder learning to speak. The tunnel breathed. Each pulse pushed a shiver of air through the fissure, the rhythm too steady to be wind. Alex Harper crouched in the half-light, eyes fixed on the words stamped into the wall. Site 19 Protocol Red Siren. He whispered the phrase aloud, half expecting it to unlock something. It did. A deep metallic groan rolled overhead. Dust sifted from the ceiling in slow motion. Far down the corridor, a wash of blue light brightened, then dimmed, then brightened again, sinking with the bass thump rising through the stone. Luna, he called. His voice sounded foreign, pitched lower by the pressure around him. No answer, only a faint scratching somewhere ahead. He moved toward the sound, boots splashing through thin puddles that shimmered like mercury. The tunnel curved left, then widened into a chamber the size of a warehouse. Its walls weren't carved, they'd been melted. Runnels of glass dripped down into a smooth basin where the fog condensed and rose again in slow waves. In the center stood Luna. She faced away, head low, tail rigid. Her reflection warped on the glass floor. "Hey, it's me." He stepped closer. The dog turned, but the motion was jerky, puppet-like. Her eyes caught the light wrong, reflecting vertical pupils that had never belonged to a mammal. "Easy, girl." The air between them shimmered, and Luna dissolved into mist, leaving only paw prints steaming on the floor. Then came the siren. Not distant now, inside the chamber, resonating from every wall at once. The note started low, subsonic, then climbed through registers until the glass vibrated in rainbow interference patterns. Alex dropped to one knee, hands clamped over his ears. Blood welled from the corner of his left eye, a thin red tear. When the sound eased, another figure stood where Luna had been. A man, early 30s, in shredded combat fatigues. Mud crusted the uniform, but the patch still showed, U.S. Army Ranger. The name strip read Caldera. He stared at Alex through milky eyes that still held purpose. One finger rose to his lips, quiet. Then he pointed upward toward the dome. Alex followed the gesture. Above them, the fog thinned just enough to reveal movement, massive shapes pressed against the translucent ceiling, ribs, tendons, a silhouette too huge to belong to anything terrestrial. Each exhale rippled the membrane, raining condensation. Calder mouthed something, 3 words Alex couldn't hear, but he caught the shape of the last one, run. The siren cut back in, louder, layered now with a second tone a fifth higher, harmonizing like two throats singing through metal. The floor flexed. Cracks spidered outward from the basin's center. Alex turned and sprinted. Calder followed, limping hard on one leg. The tunnel behind them convulsed, stone bending, then snapping. The sound wasn't collapse, it was movement. Blue light pulsed ahead, the fissure. Daylight beyond it. He climbed first, rope biting palms slick with ash. Calder shoved him upward before a shockwave blew through the shaft, flinging grit and heat like backdraft. They tumbled onto the surface together, coughing. Fog shredded around them in ribbons of steam. Alex turned just in time to see the fissure seal itself, not with rock, but with flesh-colored membrane that hardened to basalt in seconds. He stared at it, panting. What the hell is this place? Calder sat up, chest heaving. Containment, he rasped. They said it was dormant. His voice cracked like old speaker cloth. It woke when the maps were erased. Before Alex could ask, a bark pierced the fog. Real this time, familiar, desperate. He looked up the slope. Luna stood 50 yards away, whole again, tail low but alive. And beside her, half hidden by mist, was the small figure of a girl clutching the dog's harness. Neon yellow jacket. Bare feet. Alex's pulse stumbled. He rose, hands out. Everly, it's okay. You are safe now. The child didn't move. She watched him with eyes too old for her face. Mud streaked her shins, frost rimed her hair. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper of static. Don't look up. He froze. What? Don't. The rest drowned beneath a roar from above. Trees bent outward as if pressed by invisible hands. The sky itself seemed to inhale. The siren's note returned, now vibrating every atom of air, reshaping sound into geometry. Calder seized Alex's arm. "Move!" They ran. The slope pitched upward toward the ridge, the cairn somewhere ahead. Each pulse of the siren came closer, overlapping until it became continuous tone. Branches flailed in unseen wind. Shadows in the fog turned vertical, limbs, spines, silhouettes too tall, too thin, emerging only long enough to vanish again. Halfway up, Calder stumbled. Blood poured from his ears. "Leave me," he tried to say, but Alex hauled him up anyway. Luna barked from the crest, urging. Everly clung to the harness, her small hand white-knuckled around the strap. "Almost there." Alex gasped. The cairn appeared through the fog, its stones vibrating as though alive. The air around it shimmered with heat. Luna reached it first, leaping onto the lower tier. Everly followed, weightless, eyes fixed on something behind Alex. He turned. The fog at the basin's edge was collapsing inward. Through it rose a column of black geometry, triangular ribs folding and refolding, each movement birthing the next. Within that darkness burned hundreds of red points like furnace mouths. Every few seconds one flared brighter, emitting the brass throat tone that rattled the mountain. The siren wasn't a sound. It was a breathing pattern. Alex pushed Calder forward. "Go!" Calder stumbled across the cairn. The instant his boots hit the other side, light exploded, pure white, silent. Alex grabbed Luna's collar with one hand and Everly's wrist with the other and dove after him. The world folded. For a heartbeat, he felt weightless, suspended between pulses. Then gravity returned in a slam of cold air and sunlight. They were on the ridge again, mud, pine needles, the familiar slope leading to Tower 19. Behind them, the cairn still stood, but its top stone cracked, bleeding faint blue light through the fracture. The siren's tone faded to a distant hum, swallowed by the forest. Everly collapsed beside Luna, breathing in small, astonished gulps. Calder knelt, pressing a trembling hand to his temple, blood streaking his cheek. Alex turned in a slow circle. The ridge looked unchanged, same trees, same sky, but his watch said 29th October, 4 days after the storm. He looked at his own hands, skin grey with ash, nails split. His body felt like it had lived those 4 days even if his mind hadn't. Cole Whitaker's voice crackled through the radio at last, clear and calm. "Tower 19, this is District Base. If you are hearing me, do not speak. Stay where you are. I'm en route. Red Siren protocol is active." Alex stared at the handset, numb. He didn't ask questions. He just exhaled once and looked back down the ridge. The fog in the basin was closing, sealing its secrets. The final note of the siren lingered like an echo in his bones, 3 beats, each slower than the last. Thump, thump, thump. Then silence. The forest was too quiet to be safe. Alex Harper sat on the ridge beside the shattered cairn, his back against a fallen spruce. Luna dozed at his feet, her breathing shallow, paws twitching in dreams that made her whimper. Beside her, Everly Quinn leaned against Alex's shoulder, wrapped in a field blanket he dug from his emergency kit. She hadn't spoken since the run up the slope. Every few minutes her eyes fluttered open as if she expected the world to vanish again. Down the trail, Sergeant R.H.Y.S. Calder knelt by a stream, rinsing blood from his face. His uniform hung in ribbons. Dog tags clinked against his collarbone, the sound unnervingly loud in the hush. He stared at them like they belonged to someone else. The air smelled of ozone and rain-charred cedar. Far below, fog churned inside the basin, a grey ocean folding over itself, erasing every trace of what had happened. Only the cracked cairn remained, seeping a faint blue glow that pulsed with a heartbeat slower than time. The radio on Alex's belt crackled. Tower 19, this is base. Confirm you are alive. He lifted the handset, voice hoarse. Alive. 4 of us. 1 miner, 1 K9, 1 Ranger Sergeant. Location, Devil's Crown Ridge. Hold position. ETA 90 minutes. Do not move. Repeat, do not approach the basin. Protocol Red Siren in effect. Static swallowed the rest. Alex lowered the radio. Calder watched him, expression unreadable. You know what that means? Never heard it before tonight. Calder nodded once, eyes drifting toward the glowing cairn. I have. He didn't elaborate. Everly stirred, fingers clutching Luna's fur. The noise, she whispered, her first words since the ridge. It's still breathing. Alex listened, nothing but the distant hiss of wind. That's just the forest settling. No, her voice steadied. It's counting. A shiver crept down his spine. They waited. Daylight leaked slowly across the ridge, draining color from the trees until everything looked bleached. Calder scavenged what he could from his ruined pack, a half-melted compass, a flare, 2 MREs fused together by heat. He shared water from a dented canteen, hands shaking so badly that half of it spilled into the dirt. Alex forced a smile for Everly. That jacket looks warm enough. She nodded. The rain shell hung loose on her frame, sleeves swallowing her hands. It was the same one he'd found below, same frayed cuff, same stitched name, EVE. He didn't ask how it could still be warm after 25 years. When she finished sipping water, she reached for the radio. Can it talk both ways? Only if someone's listening. Everly turned the dial slowly, landing on a dead channel. Faint voices drifted through, backward, looping fragments of language like a record caught on a scratch. Siren, 19, containment. Alex took it gently from her hands. Let's keep it off till they get here. She nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the cairn's glow. The first helicopter appeared at dusk, a black silhouette sliding through the mist, rotors muted by baffled housings. No insignia. Just numbers, USFS E-117. It circled once, stirring the fog into rings, then dropped a rope line. 2 figures descended in grey uniforms with no name tags, masks covering their mouths. The smell of disinfectant hit before they landed. Which of you is Harper? One asked through a respirator. His voice was calm, bureaucratic. Alex raised a hand. The man nodded. You and the girl come first. Dog 2. Sergeant Calder will follow. Calder stiffened. Rank says otherwise. Not tonight, the masked man replied. Orders from district. They herded Alex, Everly, and Luna toward the rope. As the winch lifted them, Alex looked down at Calder still standing beside the cairn. The sergeant saluted once, the motion of a man who already knew he wasn't leaving, then turned back toward the glow. The fog folded over him like a curtain. Inside the chopper, no one spoke. Everly clung to Luna. The dog trembled with each vibration but never looked away from the window. Alex caught a glimpse of Tower 19 flashing below, a tiny square of light amid endless dark. Then the ridge vanished behind clouds. The pilot wore no patch, no rank. Only a barcode tattoo across his wrist. The co-pilot read from a laminated checklist. Subject Alpha, civilian contractor, unexposed. Subject Bravo, juvenile female, recovered. K91, contact confirmed. Site 19, pending sterilization. Alex leaned forward. Sterilization? What does that mean? Neither answered. They landed 40 minutes later at a clearing near Randall, temporary command post lit by floodlamps. Tents, generators, vehicles marked only with serial numbers. The air reeked of bleach and diesel. A handful of techs in Hajmat suits moved with quiet efficiency, collecting samples from their boots, scraping ash into vials. Ranger Cole Whitaker waited near the perimeter. Same khaki jacket, same calm posture, but his eyes had the sunken look of a man who hadn't slept since the world began. He motioned Alex aside. "You're not supposed to be alive." "Glad to disappoint." Whitaker studied him, then glanced at Everly. "She's been gone 25 years. "I know." "Then you understand what comes next." Alex shook his head. "You are not taking her anywhere without." Whitaker raised a hand. "Easy. Safe house in Ashford. Parents are still alive. That's all I can tell you." "What about Calder?" Whitaker looked past him toward the fog rising over the trees. "If he stayed behind, he's part of the SEAL now." Alex swallowed hard. "SEAL? Red Siren isn't an alarm, Harper. It's a containment protocol. Whatever that thing is down there, it calls across frequencies. You answer, it knows you." Calder was exposed. "He won't last long." He handed Alex a manila folder bound with red twine. Inside was a single page, dense print, blacked out sections, signature lines at the bottom. "Sign it. It says you never saw Obsidian Basin. You were stationed at Tower 19, storm damage only, 1 fatality in the field." Alex stared at the paper. "That's the story?" "That's the only one anyone gets." He didn't sign. They moved Everly to an unmarked van. A woman in civilian clothes, mid-40s, professional, met her with a soft blanket and a practiced smile. "I'm Jenna," she said gently. "Your mother." Everly hesitated, studying the woman's face as if trying to remember a dream. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her. Luna pressed close, whining softly. The reunion was silent but real. Whitaker nodded to 2 medics. "Dog goes with them. It's part of her imprint." When the van doors closed, Alex stood alone by the generator lights, folder still in hand. Whitaker approached, lighting a cigarette even though the signs said no open flames. "You did good, Harper. Saved a kid the world stopped looking for." "She saved herself," Alex said. "I just followed the noise." Whitaker exhaled smoke, eyes unfocused. "You hear it now, don't you?" Alex hesitated. In the distance, beyond the hum of machines, something low resonated through the valley, too faint for the others to notice, but steady. 3 beats. Thump, thump, thump. He nodded once. Whitaker dropped the cigarette, grinding it out. "Then you understand why we burn the reports." He handed Alex a thermite stick and pointed toward the cairn's coordinates marked on the map. "We finish this tonight." By midnight they were back on Devil's Crown Ridge. The fog had settled to waist height, glowing faintly from within like trapped lightning. The cairn's crack pulsed blue through the mist. Whitaker set the thermite at its base, wires snaking to a detonator in his hand. When this goes, the basin collapses. Lava hazard. Officially. Alex watched the light throb, matching the rhythm in his chest. "And if it doesn't die? Then we hope it sleeps." Whitaker looked at him one last time. "No paper trail, Harper. You get that?" Alex nodded. "I get it." Whitaker pressed the trigger. The explosion bloomed soundlessly, a column of light swallowed by fog. The ridge shook. When the air cleared, the cairn was gone, replaced by a crater steaming faintly in moonlight. Whittaker tossed the detonator into the pit. Done. Alex turned toward the dark outline of Tower 19 on the horizon. It looked smaller than he remembered, lonelier. Season's almost over, Whittaker said. Take the reassignment next year. Keeps the pattern stable. Alex frowned. Stable? Whittaker didn't answer. He started down the trail, voice trailing behind him. Red Siren needs a listener. Alex stayed until dawn. When the sun broke the horizon, fog clung only to the basin's floor. The forest was quiet again. He unclipped Luna's tag from her collar, the one Everly had gripped so tight, and hung it from the tower's railing. The wind picked up. Somewhere far below, through layers of stone and silence, came a sound like the sea turning in its sleep. A single low note, long and patient. Alex listened until it faded, then whispered into the morning. Second chances, huh? The wind didn't answer. Only the forest breathed. A week after the detonation, rain washed what was left of the ridge clean. The crater filled with water the color of steel. No one came to Devil's Crown Ridge anymore except for two men in unmarked trucks, who stayed just long enough to weld a fence and plant a warning sign. Active lava flow hazard, entry prohibited. They didn't know that the ground beneath their boots still hummed when the clouds rolled low. Everly Quinn spent her first night back in civilization beneath fluorescent lights. Doctors called it a miracle, mild hypothermia, dehydration, no fractures, no signs of aging. The blood work baffled them. DNA matched perfectly to a girl who would vanished from Mount Rainier 25 years ago, yet her cells were identical to those of a 9-year-old. She slept through most of the interviews. When she did speak, it was in half phrases that made the social workers uneasy. The sky was underwater. Luna found the door. The siren doesn't hurt if you don't breathe. Psychologists labeled it dissociative trauma. Whittaker labeled it classified. When the government finished its paperwork, Everly disappeared again, this time into a cabin outside Ashford, under new guardianship, a quiet transition arranged by Whittaker himself. Her parents, Jenna and Marcus Quinn, arrived 2 days later. Marcus was thin, face hollow from chemo, but when Everly saw him, she ran straight into his arms like no time had passed at all. Alex watched from the porch. Luna sat beside him, muzzle resting on her paws. Rain beaded on her coat. Inside, the girl's voice broke through the window glass, soft and certain. Her name's still Luna. Whittaker joined him on the porch, leaning on the railing. You did good, he said. Better than most who come out of the red zones. Alex didn't answer. He was staring at the tree line beyond the cabin, where mist hung like breath over the pines. Is it gone? He asked. Whittaker flicked ash into the rain. Dormant, maybe. Nothing down there ever really goes away. But the world's loud enough to drown it out again. Until next time. He looked down at Luna. Keep her close. Sometimes they hear through the dogs first. He left without saying goodbye. 3 months later, Tower 19 was rebuilt. A new coat of paint, new communications relay, new paperwork that said nothing had ever happened. The job offer came on a folded memo, return for observation season, optional. Alex signed it anyway. Winter thawed into spring. The basin remained fenced, flooded, its surface calm as glass. Locals called it Echo Lake, though no echo ever came back from it. Luna's health began to fade that summer. The vet said her lungs were clear, her heart steady, but she slept longer each day, ears twitching at sounds no one else could hear. On her last morning, she lay under the bunk, eyes open toward the radio. When the old VHF hissed with static, she wagged her tail once and went still. Alex buried her at the base of the tower. That night, he drank a single beer and stared through the glass until dawn. The silence felt heavier than the storm had. 1 year later, the wind had teeth again. Snow dusted the ridge in patches, melting faster near the steel stairs where warm air rose from vents that shouldn't have existed. A new dog waited in a crate by the truck, Echo, a black-masked Malinois pup chosen by Everly from a shelter photo. She'd sent a Polaroid with the adoption papers, her grinning beside Luna's headstone, a hand-drawn heart between them. On the back, in crooked kid handwriting, she'd written, "Thank you for the second yesterday." Alex pinned it above the radio. It flapped gently in the draft. Whittaker hiked up that evening, carrying burgers and a six-pack. His beard was grey, eyes bloodshot from too many briefings and too little sleep. He dropped onto the bench, cracked a beer, and stared through the window at the basin below. "Still quiet?" he asked. "For now." Whittaker nodded. "You hear it sometimes though, don't you?" Alex didn't lie. "At night. When the wind's steady. Like it's waiting for me to answer." "That's why you are still here," Whittaker said. "Containment's not a wall. It's attention. You stop listening, it gets lonely." He stood, stretching his back. "New crews don't know what they're sitting on. That's how it stays safe. You and me, we keep it remembered, so nobody else wakes it up." He handed Alex the last beer. "To ghosts that behave." They clinked cans. The toast sounded hollow. When Whittaker left, the sun was bleeding out behind Mount Rainier, painting the clouds the color of old bruises. Echo whined softly and curled under the bunk where Luna used to sleep. The tower creaked in the wind. The radio hummed faintly even though it was switched off. A single low-frequency pulsed through the metal floor, 3 beats, spaced like a heartbeat slowed by distance. Thump, thump, thump. Alex froze, listening. The sound faded, replaced by the groan of steel cooling in the night air. He almost believed it was imagination. Then the Polaroid above the radio shifted, fluttering against the glass as if stirred by breath. For a second, the reflection in the window showed not the tower, but a blurred outline of the basin, glowing faint blue beneath the clouds. He reached for the radio microphone without thinking. "Base," he whispered. "Tower 19 reporting. Do you copy?" "Static. Call, if you are there." The radio crackled once, soft as a sigh. Then a child's voice, distant but clear. "Don't look up." The line went dead. Outside, wind rattled the catwalk. The sound came again from deep below, rolling through the forest floor, old and patient, counting heartbeats. If you ever stand on Devil's Crown Ridge and hear that sound, don't wait to find out what's calling. Drop your pack. Run downhill. Because the siren isn't calling for help. It's counting who's still left to hear.